Think about the toughest Viking warrior you can imagine. We usually envision a giant swinging an axe, right? For over 100 years, archaeologists believed they found the perfect example in a grave called BJ 581. This grave was excavated in Sweden in 1878 and was packed with an incredible array of lethal weapons. It contained a sword, an axe, a spear, and even specialized armor-piercing arrows. This person was clearly a fighter. Beside the body, researchers found two sacrificed horses, a mare and a stallion, which indicated a very high rank. A full set of gaming pieces sat on the individual's lap, suggesting they were a tactical leader or commander. For 13 decades, textbooks used this grave to define what a male Viking elite looked like. But in 2017, a team of scientists performed an ancient DNA analysis on the long-dead bones. The results shocked the world. The warrior had two X chromosomes and absolutely no Y chromosome. This legendary Viking commander, buried with every tool of war, was actually a biological woman. Critics initially refused to believe it. They argued the bones were mixed up, or the DNA samples were contaminated. However, a 2019 study confirmed the DNA came from that skeleton, cementing her place as a female warrior. This discovery changed everything. It meant we had been viewing human history through a very narrow, modern lens. We often assume that roles like soldiering or leading were always exclusively reserved for men. But as we look closer at the ancient world, we see that the Burqa warrior was not a fluke. Thousands of miles away on the Eurasian steppe, other warrior women were living lives of nomadic combat. You have likely heard of the Amazons from Greek legends. Historians once thought they were purely fictional stories. It turns out those legends were likely based on real encounters with horse-riding Scythian and Sarmatian groups. Recent data suggests that in these nomadic societies, up to 1/3 of the women were buried with weapons. In 2019, a Russian tomb contained 4 female warriors spanning 3 generations. The oldest woman, nearly 50 years old, was buried in a golden headdress, signaling her massive status. These were not symbolic burials. Their skeletons show the harsh physical reality of a life spent in combat. Their leg bones were bowed from years of riding, and many show healed wounds from enemy arrows. They were not just surviving. They were active participants in the brutal wars of the ancient plains. This forces us to ask a tough question. How much history have we misunderstood because of modern bias? If elite commanders were sometimes women, who else were we wrong about? It turns out that the battlefield is not the only place where the ancient world surprises us today. If we move from the plains into the dark depths of prehistoric caves, the story gets even more incredible. For decades, we assumed the ancient artists painting on cave walls were men recording their successful hunts. A new study of handprints changes that narrative entirely. When scientists measured the finger ratios of these stencils, they found something no one expected to see. The hands that painted these masterpieces were not the hands of men or boys, as we once thought. Instead, these artists were women who had been hiding in plain sight for tens of thousands of years. It makes you wonder what else we missed, simply because we assumed women stayed on the sidelines. The truth is, our ancestors were building a world far more complex than we ever dared imagine. This complexity is visible in caves like Pech Merle. While researchers once assumed these handprints belonged to male hunters, the physical evidence tells a different story. But archaeologist Dean Snow looked closer at the 2D to 4D finger ratio. This is a simple way of saying he measured the proportions of the fingers. In many humans, the relative lengths of your fingers are influenced by hormone levels before you're even born. This creates a distinct pattern for males and females, When Snow applied these measurements to the ancient stencils, he found that 3/4 of the hands were female. The man cave theory was dead. This finding reshapes our view of Paleolithic life. These women weren't just observers, they were documenting the human experience on stone. If they were the primary artists, it raises a huge question about the rest of daily life. What else were they doing that history books forgot to mention? The answer was buried under the sand in ancient Turkey. Archaeologists discovered a massive archive of over 23,000 cuneiform tablets from the Old Assyrian period. These tablets aren't poems or myths, they are business receipts. They tell the story of a sophisticated, female-led economy that functioned nearly 4,000 years ago. While the men were traveling across dangerous trade routes, the women stayed in the city of Assur. But they weren't just keeping the house in the modern sense, they were the masterminds of a massive textile industry. These women manufactured fabrics specifically for export, turning raw wool into high-value products for international markets. The tablets contain letters where wives tell their husbands exactly how much their goods should be sold for. They were the ones setting the prices and managing the accounts. They even acted as venture capitalists. They managed credit, issued loans, and invested their own silver back into the family business to keep the trade caravans moving. This wasn't some informal arrangement based on trust alone. These women had the legal right to sue anyone who tried to cheat them out of their earnings. They were independent economic agents who could own property and accumulate wealth in their own names. Their business letters are filled with sharp negotiations and strategic planning. It's clear that in the ancient Near East, a woman's place was often in the corner office. They were the financial backbone of one of the most successful trading empires. But this wasn't the only place where women held their own. If you traveled south to the banks of the Nile, you'd find a society with even more radical ideas. In ancient Egypt, the concept of legal parity was already thousands of years old. A woman there didn't need a man's permission to do anything with her money. They could buy land, sell houses, and even decide who would inherit their fortune. They were living with a level of freedom that wouldn't return for many centuries. This independence extended all the way to the end of a marriage. If a relationship wasn't working, an Egyptian woman could initiate a divorce and keep her property. As we look at these ancient legal documents and hand-painted caves, a new picture emerges. We are seeing a world where contribution was based on capability, not just gender. Modern science is finally giving us the tools to prove what the evidence has been trying to tell us all along. We are moving past the assumptions that once defined our history. As we analyze new remains and decode ancient tablets, we uncover clues that force us to rethink the stories we've been told. The legal landscape of ancient Egypt is a prime example. In the Nile Valley, women didn't stay in the shadows. They stood on nearly equal footing with men in the eyes of the law. Contracts show women buying land and selling homes entirely on their own. They signed their own legal documents and managed their wealth without needing a male guardian to act for them. The law also ensured marriage wasn't a financial trap. If a relationship failed, a woman could initiate a divorce and walk away with her property intact. Most importantly, the law protected her financial future. She was legally entitled to 1/3 of all property the couple had acquired together during their marriage, ensuring she wasn't left with nothing. We even see women reaching the absolute peak of political power. Take Hatshepsut, who didn't just rule as a queen consort, but took the title of full pharaoh with absolute authority years after she died. Later rulers tried to erase her name from monuments. Historians now believe this was a political move to secure their own legitimacy, rather than an attack on her gender. For over a century, we missed these details because of how we interpreted archaeology. We relied on a flawed method called gender by association to identify the people we found. If a skeleton was buried with a sword or an axe, early researchers assumed it was a man. If the grave held jewelry or a loom, it was simply labeled as female. This wasn't actual science. It was just us projecting our own modern biases onto the ancient world. But today, the technological revolution in bioarchaeology has changed the game and corrected our vision. Now, we use ancient DNA testing to look at the actual chromosomes of the skeletons. This is how we proved that the legendary Viking warrior at Birka was biologically a woman. She wasn't just a fighter. She was buried with a full set of gaming pieces on her lap. This suggests she was a tactical leader or a commander, making high-level strategic decisions. We are also using isotope analysis. By testing the chemical signatures in teeth and bones, we can track exactly where people moved and lived during their childhood and adult lives. These tests have revealed that in many ancient cultures, women were the primary travelers. They moved between groups, acting as the essential agents of cultural transmission, spreading new technologies and ideas. These findings don't suggest every ancient society was some perfect matriarchy. Instead, they show that the human past was much more diverse and flexible than our old history books ever suggested. History is being rewritten by looking at the bones we already have. We are finally asking the right questions without letting our own modern assumptions get in the way of the truth. Our ancestors were survivors who couldn't afford to waste talent. They lived in a world where contribution was often based on what you could do, rather than who you were told to be. When we strip away the myths and look at the evidence, we see a story of humanity that is far more complex. It is a story where everyone played a vital role. If you found this journey into our shared past fascinating, make sure to like this video. Subscribe to The First Why to join us as we continue to explore our origins. We upload new deep dives every week to uncover the truth about how we became human. Thanks for watching, and never stop asking why the world ended up this way.